Why does the West have military bases all over Africa, yet African nations have no military bases in their partner nations? If establishing military bases is meant to strengthen ties, why don't African nations have them abroad? The issue lies at the core of the concept itself. Military bases are not about ensuring peace, but about asserting power. British soldiers roam freely in Africa, often with no regard for local laws, sometimes even committing crimes and escaping punishment. Their military presence guarantees that Africa is being monitored and controlled. This is precisely why Africa has no military bases in the West. It was never about fostering good relations. But does anyone have the courage to speak this truth? Dr. Arikana did, without hesitation. In her speech, she raised questions that would unsettle many Africans, prompting them to confront their leaders.
Tell me, why is it that we are here in Ghana, there is a military base here that American soldiers can walk in, no passport, no ID, they walk right through. If they commit crimes, they rape women, they kill women.
But do her arguments hold up to scrutiny? Let's find out. Imagine a world where foreign soldiers roam freely on African soil, without needing identification, committing crimes without consequence, and evading local justice. A world where African countries have no such presence on Western soil. Is this the picture of true sovereignty and independence? Unfortunately, this is not a dystopian vision of the future, but a stark reality of our present. And it's not what we are saying. These were the words of Dr. Arikana during her speech. And she has a point.
Where is the Ghanaian military base in the United States? Where is the French military base? Where is the Burkina Faso military base in France? Where is the Nigerian military base in Russia? Every superpower is building bases throughout Africa.
Across the African continent, Western powers maintain military bases and exert influence with little to no accountability, perpetuating a modern form of colonialism. Despite Africa's rich resources and vast potential, Western nations continue to exploit the continent under the guise of partnership, development aid, and security cooperation. To understand the full extent of this modern-day imperialism, we must delve into the historical and contemporary factors that allow Western dominance to persist and explore the urgent need for a strategic shift in Africa's approach to foreign powers. Why do American soldiers roam freely in Africa, while there are no African troops stationed in the United States or other Western countries? The continued presence of Western military bases in Africa presents a glaring contradiction to the ideals of sovereignty and independence. In Ghana, for example, American troops enjoy privileges that defy local authority. They walk freely without identification and are protected by immunity from local laws. This is not an isolated case. Western military forces are strategically positioned across the continent, from Djibouti to Senegal. Their stated purpose? To fight insurgencies and maintain regional stability. But whose stability are we really talking about? These bases are the visible symbols of a much deeper, insidious control that sees Africa not as an equal partner, but as a strategic asset. The official narratives often justify these military installations by citing the need to combat insurgencies, but the real reasons are far more complex and self-serving. Western countries are primarily concerned with safeguarding their economic interests, particularly their access to Africa's vast natural resources and strategic trade routes. Consider AFRICOM, the United States Africa Command, which has established numerous bases under the pretext of promoting stability and fighting extremism. Yet these bases operate largely outside the oversight of African governments, creating zones of foreign sovereignty that undermine national authority and local governance. The agreements that allow these bases are often cloaked in secrecy, made without the consent of the people, and usually involve significant concessions that compromise national sovereignty. Moreover, the strategic placement of these bases, often near critical resources such as oil fields, uranium mines, and major shipping lanes, reveals their true purpose: to protect Western economic interests. This has nothing to do with maintaining African security. Rather, it is about controlling the geopolitical landscape to favor Western dominance. The presence of these bases also facilitates Western intelligence operations and covert activities, further eroding local governance and stoking instability. This is not partnership. It is neo-imperialism masquerading as security cooperation. This foreign military presence creates a dual system of governance where the rule of law is selectively applied, fostering resentment among local populations. It also undermines the legitimacy of African governments, which are seen as complicit or powerless in the face of Western dictates. The question remains, why do African nations continue to allow this blatant infringement on their sovereignty? Who really profits when African resources fuel Western economies? And why do African countries see so little benefit? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Let's turn our attention to the flow of Africa's natural resources, resources that are critical to the global economy, yet often provide minimal benefit to the African continent. Uranium from Niger powers France, yet Niger remains among the world's poorest nations. Similarly, gold, diamonds, and rare minerals extracted from Africa enrich Western industries and economies, but the local communities that mine these resources see little of the wealth generated. The Western narrative suggests that Africa is incapable of managing its resources effectively. This narrative, however, is a smokescreen designed to obscure the truth. Africa's resources are systematically undervalued and underpriced by Western corporations, which pay next to nothing for extraction rights and then reap enormous profits on the global market. This is not a fair exchange, it is a modern form of plunder. Consider the cocoa industry. Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire, which produce nearly 60% of the world's cocoa, receive only a fraction of the $100 billion global chocolate market. Western companies buy raw cocoa at rock-bottom prices, refine it into high-value products, and then sell these products at a huge markup. The farmers who toil to produce this cocoa struggle to survive on wages that do not even cover their basic needs. The story is similar in the mining sector. The Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, is home to vast reserves of cobalt, a mineral critical for the batteries used in electronic devices. Yet, despite this wealth, the DRC remains mired in poverty. This is because the West has designed a system in which Africa is forced to supply cheap raw materials while buying back finished products at exorbitant prices. This cycle of dependency is not a result of Africa's inability to manage its resources, but rather a deliberate strategy to keep African nations economically weak and politically subservient. Furthermore, international trade agreements often disadvantage African countries, locking them into unequal terms that benefit Western economies. These agreements, enforced by institutions like the World Trade Organization (WTO), claim to promote free trade but often skew heavily in favor of Western nations. African countries are pressured into lowering tariffs, opening up their markets, and cutting subsidies, all while Western countries maintain protections for their industries. This is further complicated by the role of the International Monetary Fund (IMF) and the World Bank, which often impose stringent conditions on African countries in exchange for loans. These conditions typically include austerity measures that reduce government spending on essential services like education and healthcare, further entrenching poverty and inequality. The economic exploitation of Africa is deeply intertwined with diplomatic relations and international politics. Why, then, do African leaders remain silent or appear complicit in these dealings? The apparent silence of African leaders in the face of Western exploitation is a complex issue rooted in historical and contemporary realities. On one side, there is a pervasive fear of economic sanctions, political isolation, and even orchestrated coups. The West has a long history of undermining or overthrowing African leaders who resist their interests. Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana and Patrice Lumumba of the Congo are just two examples of leaders who were deposed or assassinated for standing up to Western control. On the other side, there is the problem of political inertia. Many African leaders are more concerned with maintaining their power than advocating for the long-term welfare of their people. They are often co-opted by Western interests through various means, including aid packages, military support, and diplomatic backing. This support comes at a cost, the continued subservience to Western interests, and the perpetuation of the status quo. However, this silence and complicity have significant consequences. By failing to challenge Western exploitation, African leaders betray not only their nations but the entire continent. They perpetuate a cycle of dependency and poverty while proclaiming independence and sovereignty. The youth of Africa are not blind to this hypocrisy. They see it clearly and are beginning to demand more from their governments. Youth movements across Africa, from the anti-SARS protests in Nigeria to the anti-corruption uprisings in Sudan, signal a growing discontent with the status quo. These movements demand leaders who are not afraid to stand up against Western interests, leaders willing to protect Africa's dignity and resources. Current leaders face a choice: align themselves with the aspirations of their people, or continue as pawns in a game dictated by foreign powers. Moreover, there is a psychological dimension to this problem. Many African leaders are trapped in a mindset of inferiority and fear, a relic of the colonial era. They have been conditioned to believe that Western approval is necessary for legitimacy and survival. This mindset must change. Africa needs leaders who are bold, visionary, and unapologetically African. Leaders who are not afraid to chart a new course, free from the constraints of Western dominance. The African Union (AU), for instance, could play a pivotal role in amplifying African voices on the global stage, but only if it moves beyond mere rhetoric and takes concrete actions to defend the continent's interests. This includes building a coalition of like-minded nations willing to resist Western pressure and advocate for a new world order that respects African sovereignty and values. As we examine the failures of leadership, it's essential to consider the broader implications of these actions, or inactions, on Africa's international standing. How can Africa regain its lost dignity and assert itself more forcefully on the world stage? Reclaiming African sovereignty requires a multifaceted approach, beginning with unity. The dream of a united Africa, as envisioned by leaders like Kwame Nkrumah and Patrice Lumumba, must be revitalized. A united Africa can negotiate better deals, resist exploitative practices, and demand fair treatment in international affairs. Strengthening the African Union. AU is crucial in this action. The AU must evolve from a platform for diplomatic dialogue to a powerful bloc capable of collective bargaining and taking decisive action against foreign exploitation. Additionally, African nations must prioritize building strong regional institutions that can withstand Western pressure. This involves creating robust legal frameworks to manage and protect natural resources, investing in homegrown industries, and leveraging regional markets for economic growth. By fostering intra-African trade and reducing dependency on Western markets, Africa can build a more resilient and self-sufficient economy. Education is another cornerstone of this strategy. African countries must invest in educating their youth about their rich history, culture, and the importance of self-reliance. It's time to reject the colonial mindset that Africa cannot manage its affairs. Africa has produced some of the world's greatest thinkers, leaders, and innovators. The potential within the continent is immense and must be fully harnessed. Africa must also diversify its international partnerships. While the West has historically dominated African affairs, there are now more opportunities to engage with emerging powers like China, Russia, India, and Brazil. However, Africa must be cautious not to replace one form of dependency with another. Negotiating fair terms and ensuring that partnerships genuinely benefit African interests is key to avoiding a new form of economic colonization. Furthermore, Africa needs to develop a new economic model that prioritizes self-sufficiency and resilience. This means investing in agriculture, technology, and sustainable industries that can create jobs and drive economic growth. It also means establishing value-added industries to process raw materials locally, retaining more economic benefits within the continent. Another critical aspect is strengthening Africa's defense capabilities. Developing a robust, unified African military force would serve as a deterrent against foreign military interventions and protect African interests at home and abroad. This force could reduce the continent's reliance on Western military support, which often comes with strings attached and compromises African sovereignty. Moreover, Africa must assert itself more forcefully in international forums. It must demand a seat at the table in global decision-making processes and refuse to be sidelined or treated as a junior partner. This requires building coalitions with other developing regions and pushing for reforms in institutions like the United Nations, the World Bank, and the IMF to ensure they reflect a more equitable global order. Building a strong, unified African military force is another crucial step. This force could serve as a deterrent against foreign military interventions and protect African interests both at home and abroad. It would also reduce the continent's reliance on Western military support, which often comes with strings attached. Finally, Africa must cultivate a sense of pride and confidence in its identity and capabilities. This cultural revolution is as important as any political or economic reform. By embracing and celebrating their heritage, Africans can break free from the psychological chains of colonialism and forge a new path forward. These strategies are not just theoretical. They are already being put into practice in various parts of the continent. What are the signs of this new wave of self-determination, and what do they mean for Africa's future? Across the continent, a new spirit of resistance and awakening is taking shape. From the streets of Ouagadougou to the fields of Accra, young Africans are standing up and demanding change. They are challenging their governments, calling for accountability, and rejecting the status quo of Western exploitation and domestic complicity. This movement is not just about removing corrupt leaders. It's about fundamentally transforming how Africa engages with the world. Youth-led movements are pushing for a complete overhaul of the current political and economic systems. They are advocating for transparency, accountability, and governance that truly serves the people. In Burkina Faso, a youth-led revolution led to significant political changes, bringing leaders more in tune with the needs of their citizens. In Sudan, similar movements toppled a decades-long dictatorship, sparking hope for a new era of governance. These movements are not isolated incidents. They are part of a broader continental awakening. They reflect a growing consciousness among Africans, particularly the youth, who are no longer willing to accept the status quo. The message is clear. Africa is waking up, and the days of passive acceptance are over. The African diaspora also plays a critical role in this revolution. Africans abroad are mobilizing, raising awareness, and using their resources to support movements back home. They are leveraging their positions in Western societies to advocate for policies that benefit Africa, and to push back against the narrative of Africa as a continent in perpetual need of saving. Moreover, social media and technology have become powerful tools in this revolution. They have enabled the rapid dissemination of information, coordination of protests, and global solidarity movements that challenge oppressive regimes and foreign exploitation. Platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and WhatsApp have been instrumental in organizing mass protests, exposing corruption, and fostering a pan-African consciousness. But this revolution must be nurtured. It requires commitment from all Africans, both on the continent and in the diaspora. It requires a rejection of the old ways of thinking and a bold embrace of new, self-sustaining strategies. The world must recognize that a new Africa is emerging, an Africa that will no longer play the role of a subservient partner, but will stand as an equal on the global stage. The signs of this new revolution are evident everywhere. In Nigeria, young people are leading efforts to demand better governance and accountability. In South Africa, there is a growing push for economic justice and reparations for apartheid-era crimes. Across the continent, there is a palpable sense of urgency and a refusal to accept the status quo. This new revolution is not just about political change. It's about a cultural and psychological transformation. It's about reclaiming African identity, rejecting the inferiority complex imposed by colonialism, and embracing a future where Africa is self-reliant and proud. As we move towards the end, it is evident that while the path forward for Africa is fraught with challenges, it is also filled with immense opportunities for a brighter and more equitable future. So to sum this all up, Africa stands at a pivotal crossroads. The choices made today will shape the continent's future for generations. It's time for a new revolution, one driven not by weapons but by ideas, unity, and a relentless pursuit of dignity and self-determination. The world is watching, and Africa must rise to reclaim its rightful place on the global stage, demanding respect and fairness. The future of Africa is in the hands of its people. Let's not squander this opportunity. Africa will rise, and when it does, the world will have no choice but to take notice. The unfinished business of liberation must be completed. Now is the time for Africa to stand as a true equal in the world, free from exploitation and control. Let us unite, resist external domination, and build the Africa that we and future generations deserve. Together, we can forge a new path forward, an Africa that is strong, united, and truly free. The revolution is not coming, it is here, and it is up to all of us to ensure it brings about the change we have long desired. Do you think Africa can change? And will the change be possible without external help? Let us know in the comment section. Do you believe without interference, Africa can really become the continent of wealth, peace, and prosperity? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.